Hello. So this is the part where I say sorry for being away for a while. It's become a bit of a habit from time to time. Life is all I can say at this moment. Also, I am trying to streamline all my videos and make the process faster since I have a bajillion ideas I want to make. So I've started to work on a build-up of content. That way I can release something each week. That probably won't take effect until next month. But in the meantime, I am diligently working to complete my Orbost City of Knives V-book. What is a V-book, I hear you ask? Well, it is a video book with all the content on the screen, with the chapters broken up in the description box below, so you can move to the various sections. I was actually watching a video by AJ Pickett a couple of months ago, and he mentioned he was going to start releasing V-books, so Orbost will be a V-book. I've decided to keep working on my Monster Monday releases as well, and my Reddit horror stories, which you're watching right now. So while I have my NPC Eshmira on Monster Mondays, I'll have my new cast member Lilith the Succubus head waitress of the Planar Pint to do my horror stories. Oh, I forgot to mention, I made my first clumsy attempt at a cartoon called In Between Worlds. It's the first of what will be 6 webisodes. The story is based in an interdimensional tavern called the Planar Pint. You can find a link to the first episode in the links below. Anyway, without further ado, here is a long horror story that caught my eye last month. Done ASMR style. Enjoy.
Ha! I've read things you people wouldn't believe. Accidental metagaming and shenanigans caused party to create the Opioid Epidemic by AkiraRenai. This is long, bring your snacks. This story happened some years back in my first ever D&D campaign. I had been invited to this campaign by my coworkers, as all of our players worked at the same place, and I'd overheard at times that they played D&D once a week. After a while of working at this job, I had started to become friends with the majority of these folks, and they thought I'd have fun trying the game out with them, as it was a perfect time to try since one of their DMs was going to run a new campaign. I had never played anything like a TTRPG before, so I was very new to the system. It ended up being a fairly brutal first-time setting for any newbie, but there was fun had along the way. Our cast for this story. Me, Rogue, a half-elf rogue. I did have a backstory, but it ended up not being super prevalent to the campaign. Ranger, a forest elf ranger and your typical sweetheart, helper character. Her player was also newish to the game, but she had been playing other campaigns with this group before. She was a little naive to how the world works in certain regards and tended to stick close to specific players. This will be important later. Alchemist, originally another player's first character in this campaign. They had decided Alchemist would not be a great fit for the combat and island campaign, and then re-rolled for a different character. The Alchemist then became a background character in the campaign, who is important for this story. DM, the creator of this island campaign, perpetual overseer of the party and throwing suffering their way. He and one other DM in the group had a bad habit of min-maxing D&D and making a numbers game out of it. This wasn't entirely bad, he was a good DM, but it definitely detracted from the game as most players had started with interesting backstories that ended up not meaning much, for the campaign was pretty combat heavy. This is important for why the events of the story happened the way they did. For that pesky context, the entire story takes place on an island. Thus, the island campaign. The general plot involved our party's home kingdom in a war with a different kingdom. However, the opposing kingdom had found some way to desecrate the lands of our home kingdom and make them uninhabitable. Dangerous. Since our kingdom was in desperate need of lands that were not corrupted, or a way to win the war, find a cure to the desecration of the lands, they decided to try settling a new base on an island off the coast of the kingdom that was known for being cursed and having dark eons old powerful beings lurking there. Every previous attempt at settling there had failed miserably. This was a place where the party routinely got its ass handed to it at every single combat encounter. And even the small settlement that the kingdom ordered to be set up there for plot purposes was not immune to having things go bump in the night. People could be dragged off and never seen again. All kinds of higher-level monsters roamed in the forests and laid claim to different parts of the island. The goblins camped nearby and dealt pretty nasty damage. The town was mainly occupied by regular people building the settlement along with their families, and some military folk from the kingdom who served as quest givers for the party. They were also heavily reliant on the ships bringing rations and supplies periodically, as not much grew on the island that was edible or didn't have strange effects. That meant the settlers were scared, hungry, overworked, and bored when not building the settlement or surviving on this island, as there wasn't anything else to do. But because the kingdom had no real choice other than to desperately try settling there again, and with advanced knowledge that this task would be highly dangerous and very difficult, the kingdom sent out requests for adventurer parties that would be rewarded handsomely if they managed to help settle the island, find a way to end the war, or fix the corruption of the lands. The initial party there, where 7 of us got continuously whipped by enemies, as every time the party ended up going out of the settlement, they would end up in nightmare encounters that routinely almost always near killed player characters. Some PCs ended up leaving the island entirely if their character didn't actually die outright in combat. In character, these players usually ended up fearful of leaving the settlement to explore, or players found their specific class or abilities were not very useful for this campaign, and ended up having to re-roll new characters like Alchemist player did. This is the wider issue of trying min-max the combat. While Island itself is supposed to be terrifying because there are so incredibly many monsters and godlike beings lurking in the shadows, it mainly turned our party off to wanting to go out and do any task outside of the settlement. We were almost always railroaded into combat scenarios, and our party being so big at 6 or 7 players meant combat took a while. Another issue we had was roleplay wasn't entirely existent. I think a lot of people in the game had issues with this, as there were some new players like me who weren't used to roleplay nor how to exactly do it. Some who loved roleplay, and for sure one player who could not wrap their head around it whatsoever. This sometimes led to miscommunication in who was doing what, and if other characters knew what some characters were up to in current scenes. This was also a problem in other campaigns with the same group but different DMs, but that is a story for another time. So when we weren't heading off into combat, playing combat encounters, or recovering outside of combat, not a whole lot happened. Most character backstories ended up not mattering at all. The party's main goal was just to survive. I ended up playing Rogue, and thankfully was one of the players who did not end up having to re-roll my character later on. I was also fairly useful in combat despite being new to the game. Every session was a throw the characters out into the island and watch as they run into the next eldritch horror and barely survive. After quite a few of these sessions and the party not having much fun, our DM decided to run a session where the party stays in the settlement for 1 month and helps build up the place to better defend against the horrors of the island. No combat. The artificer helped with tools and blacksmithing. Another member was helping to build houses, churches, etc. Ranger was teaching the townsfolk to forage for food and hunt. Everyone was able to help out in some way. Except me. My rogue had nothing to do. I ended up being new to all this D&D stuff, making my background charlatan, which was not at all useful for this purpose. I wasn't good for much else besides talking to people, playing some card games, and stealing things. The most I could contribute to this session was playing games with settlers and providing some small entertainment when the workers were not working. Out of boredom and desperation, thinking at least maybe I could nab some spare food items for the party for our next venture into the depths of this accursed island, I decided to join in when Ranger was teaching people how to forage, which meant I got to forage for things too. I ended up stumbling across some berry shrubs, but I didn't make a high enough roll to know for sure what they were, if they were edible, etc. Same with Ranger, who with a forest fae elf background was very knowledgeable on all things foraging. I think she ended up rolling low on her check. The former alchemist was still at the settlement and had become something of a sort of potion master NPC. So surely he must know what these berries do, right? I ended up going to the alchemist to figure it out. At worst, the berries were inedible. At best, maybe they buffed the party or something, right? DM. The alchemist, after 5 minutes of studying the berries, pops one into his mouth and goes to sit down. Me? So, what do they do? Alchemist. In about 20 minutes, give or take, I'm going to feel good. Oh. Turns out they can get you really high and make you hallucinate for about an hour or so before wearing off. Cool. LSD berries. My immediate reply to the DM. Can I try making wine out of them? To me it sounded like a good idea. Maybe we could use this in combat to poison something and take them down for the count. Or use the wine for some other purpose, right? DM. Roll for X. I forget what he had me roll, maybe Arcana, but I ended up rolling high. DM. Alright, you can make wine out of it, but it takes time. Nice. In-game we had about a week left of this month-long sabbatical, so I ended up rolling to see how much wine I can make throughout that week. I ended up being able to make 7 or so barrels of wine. As I was a new player and a rogue, DM suggested I could sell the wine back to my informant in the kingdom for some neat items. Cool, I thought. This will turn out great. Here's where shit goes off the rails. Something to know about Ranger. Her player was a bit shy, and she was raised fairly conservatively, so she isn't always aware of certain aspects of the world until you tell her. That isn't to say she doesn't know some of these topics, just that her mind is a touch more hopeful and innocent than others. She also tended to stick with me in and out of game, or stick with DM in other games where he played a character and wasn't DMing. The majority of our players were very enthusiastic about devolving the conversations periodically into theoretical things they could do to min-max their characters in combat. So they ended up talking over Ranger and I. There were sessions where we ended up not doing much or not being able to talk much at all. I know she especially had some problems asserting herself at times, which is probably what led to this next part. With this in mind, Ranger apparently followed me to the alchemist hut and overheard all of our conversation. Out of game, mind you. She never explicitly said she came with me. I had been under the impression that I had gone alone to the alchemist, until suddenly Ranger piped up after my wine comment and said she was going to tell the villagers about the berries. Because it seemed Ranger had been trying to cultivate some gardens inside of the settlement, and bushes of these LSD berries had been planted there despite her not knowing for sure what the berries did. I know I don't remember these bushes being planted in any gardens in game during this month of preparations, but maybe she had just assumed it was something her character would have done? I may have also missed that part of the session, so I'll give her the benefit of the doubt here. The DM, upon hearing her mention Ranger is there with Rogue, does a double take. DM, so you followed Rogue to the alchemist and heard all of this? Ranger, yes. Me, but I went alone. You never said you were coming with. Ranger, I followed after you. I saw you take the berries and was curious. Okay, this is fine. I guess that doesn't hurt anything. She had rolled to try and figure out what they were before we went to alchemist anyway. The DM ultimately lets it slide and continues on, because she had mentioned telling the settlers about the effects of the berries too. DM, are you sure you want to tell the settlers about the berries? Ranger, yeah, of course. I tell them the berries cause hallucinations and to not eat them. My elf thinks of these people as her tribe. She doesn't want them getting sick from these berries. DM nods and gives her a strange look, but allows her to do this. So Ranger ends up telling the settlers why the berries are bad for them, that they cause hallucinations and they should remove the bushes from the gardens. Verbatim. You know where this is going to go. I know where this is going to go. She didn't. Never once did it cross her mind that maybe telling the bored, scared, wrung-out settlers that the berries cause hallucinations is a bad idea. Cue the hilarity of the settlers eating the berries to have a very good time, as well as replanting the berries in the settlement gardens. Some settlers give up working on the settlement entirely because they figure, fuck it. If they're gonna die, which is very likely at this point with how shit the island is, they might as well have some fun before then. Other party members get clued in and also start getting high, because their characters also hate the damn island and rather not be there. Every time we left the settlement, we got handed a pretty brutal combat scenario. I can't say I blame them. I'm pretty sure I even tried a berry to see what happened before I started making the wine in-game. I ended up making enough barrels of wine in that week to sell back to my informant, which granted every party member a magic item of their choosing because the DM was being gracious. I even had some wine left over I ended up using later on in the campaign. Apparently, LSD wine has stronger effects. A drink will put you out for a whole day. Ranger, on the other hand, was horrified to know the settlers and party are getting high off of these berries and continuing to eat them despite her protests. She truly hadn't meant to cause this rapid cascade effect. Nothing works. The settlers just keep eating the LSD berries. So much so that when the settlement gets attacked later on by the horrors of the island, the guards were all high on berries, so the enemy has advantage. Fantastic. We survived that encounter, and so do most settlers, but clearly the epidemic isn't going to go away. Eventually, we end up delving deep into the island and finding a way to heal the desecrated land, though I'm not sure if the LSD berries continued on in the kingdom from there. They probably did, considering the wine I sold to my informant. Regardless, the settlement gets abandoned as soon as possible afterwards, and the combat never really got better as we progressed the story. If I remember right, at the end of the campaign, my rogue and the bard wizard ended up doing the headshake silent agreement thing to outright kill the NPC that had been our military kingdom quest giver for telling us we had to stay on the island for some reason or another, just to get the campaign over with. The LSD wine tale was the most fun we had in that entire campaign as a party, beside the time we sacrificed far too many companions to a set of spiral death trap stairs. Ranger still felt really bad, but she did have some fun out of it, so all's well that ends well. Even if the players wish the campaign had less min-maxing and more fun character tomfoolery like this. There were other campaigns with other DMs in that group, but they ended up not being finished properly due to various reasons. I think this was the only campaign I played that we actually managed to finish when I played with them. TLDR, my rogue finds out berries cause hallucinations on Island of Horror and Death. Ranger accidentally metagames, overhears this, and tells settlers on said island about LSD berries. Drug epidemic ensues. There's an old truth in tabletop gaming. There are usually two kinds of dungeon masters. The storyteller, a weaver of narrative tapestries, obsessed with your character's tragic past, your unresolved rivalries, and that one cryptic journal entry in your backstory they totally plan to use against you in Act 3. And the second DM is the tactician, the war general behind the screen. This is the kind of DM who lights up when initiative is rolled, tracks monster stats like a sports coach, and probably played a lot of Warhammer before picking up the DMG. From the outside, the island campaign had all the signs of the former. A cursed island? Lost settlements? Eldritch horrors in the fog. That's premium, Dark Souls, or Elden Ring world building. It screams narrative potential. But once you got past the setting, it became clear. This wasn't about your story, it was about the DM's map. Players were cannon fodder. The island was a meat grinder. Every step into the forest wasn't a narrative hook, it was a trap. Like some grim fantasy version of Oregon Trail where the reward for foraging wasn't food, but something in the underbrush biting your hand. The real tragedy is that the DM probably did care about his setting, a lot. But he fell into a common trap, one that hits world-building DMs hard. He got so wrapped up in the world he made, he forgot to care about the people living in it. Player backstories? Nah. Class synergy? Irrelevant. Character goals? Doesn't matter when you're getting mauled by dire elk. It became a game of survival, not storytelling. And that can be fun if everyone's on board. In the end, this DM may have built a great setting if he had allowed player agency, proportionate combat scenarios, and rewarding exploration. Now let's talk about what may be the most accidentally genius subplot in the entire campaign: the LSD berries. This whole thing started as a rogue just trying to be helpful, and suddenly, boom, psychedelic bush wine. The tone shifts hard here. We go from grimdark survival horror to full-on Breaking Bad meets Midsummer. The distilling barrels of liquid hallucination was a missed opportunity. I'm talking psi warfare on the wilderness. Instead of intoxicating the villages, which, let's face it, was a rookie move, the players could have weaponized the berries. Think about it. Laced food left as bait for patrolling monsters? The thief smearing hallucinogenic wine on his blades? Hell, even smoking out the forest with burning berry fumes could have been a tactic. Picture monsters tripping so hard they start fighting trees or hugging each other. But none of that happened, because by the time the wine hit the barrels, the players had mentally checked out. They'd accepted that the island was unconquerable, that their actions didn't really matter. Anyway, thank you all for listening to this D&D horror story. Helios has given me the duty of reading these moving forward. And if you get a chance, be sure to check out my new cartoon series, In Between Worlds, which is linked in the description below. Bye!